Hello everyone, welcome to Philosophy Aid. In this video we're going to be talking about the concepts of validity and soundness and logical arguments. So just to start off with, I'm going to give you a brief, simple introduction to the definition of logic, what logic is. So logic is simply the study of the systematic study of the valid rules of inference. So in other words, how we prove or argue for a proposition, and the term proposition or statement are used pretty interchangeably in philosophy and logic. It's how we argue or prove a proposition on the basis of a set of other propositions known as the premises. So here I'll give you an example of a logical argument. And in a logical argument, you'll often see that the premises are abbreviated P1, P2, P3, P4, and so on. Conclusions often abbreviated as C, the letter C. So if you see that, you'll understand what's up there. But in this one, we have premise 1, which is a conditional statement. In other words, it's an if, comma, then statement. And in a conditional statement, we have a first part, which is called the antecedent, which I've underlined in red, and the consequent, which I've underlined in blue. It's just a two-part proposition or statement. And then we have premise 2. I press the on button. Conclusion. Through affirming the antecedent, we arrive at the consequent through P2, and then we arrive at the conclusion. The rule of logic, or the rule of inference that we're using there, is called modus ponens. Modus ponens is short for modus ponendo ponens, and it's abbreviated MP. And that means the mode of affirming or affirmation through affirming. So basically, we affirm the antecedent, that first part, and through affirming the antecedent, we affirm the consequent, which gives us our conclusion. P2 is that affirming of the antecedent. So that gets us to the concept of validity. What validity is just making sure that your structure, your logical rules that you're using are correct. So it's making sure that this argument is formatted in such a way that the conclusion necessarily follows from these premises if they were true. So if these premises are in a valid argument, if these premises are true, then the conclusion has to be true. It has to follow from them, and it has to be true. So to clarify here, I'll just put up a definition. Validity, in other words, is a valid argument is structured in such a way that the conclusion necessarily follows from the premises if they were true. It is impossible for the argument's premises to be true and the conclusion to be false. So in other words, if these premises are true, such as in this argument, if those premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. So I already know, because I've tested this device, I've tested the remote, I tested the bulb. I know if I press this on button that it's going to light up, and just to prove it, yep, there we go. So that's a valid argument. We tested it. It's P1 and P2 are true. The conclusion is true. It's sound. So that gets us into the concept of soundness. Soundness, unlike validity, which just has to do with the structure, making sure everything's structured correctly, soundness has to do with truth. So is your argument, does it actually conform with reality? Does it match reality? So a sound argument is both valid, it's set up correctly, it's structured correctly via the laws of inference, and it's actually true. The premises are true. So that's a sound argument. So in a intro to logic class, a lot of times they'll ask you to get these concepts down. They'll ask you to form an argument that is valid but not sound. So I'll give you an example of that. Here's an argument that's valid but not sound. And it's the same argument, but to make it unsound, what we're going to do is we're going to change the facts of reality. We're going to change the state of affairs. So we're going to take the battery out of our remote here and set that aside. And so now, premise 1 is no longer true. If these two were true, the conclusion would necessarily follow. So it's still valid, But because the state of affairs have changed, the facts have changed, P1 is no longer true, and I press it, nothing happens. So that is now a valid but unsound argument. So just to, once again, contrast, here's the definition of validity, here is the definition of soundness. And if you like, you can pause the video here to review. Again, validity just has to just dealing with your structure of your argument, make sure it's set up in such a way that that conclusion is going to follow necessarily from those premises if they are true. Soundness is actually saying that your argument is valid, and it's also, the premises are also true, so it's set up correctly, you're using logic correctly, and it's also true. And one last example of a valid but not sound argument. This one's kind of funny. When I was a kid, I wanted to play football, and my dad would always say, "Hey Brian, if you want to grow up and be big and strong, play football like Turner Gill. You better eat your green beans, because that's the only way you're going to get big and strong." Well, I'm not big and strong. I didn't play football. My dad's argument was flawed. Thing is, if his premises were true, namely this P1 here, if green beans could make you get big and strong, then, and if P2, if I actually ate them, sorry I didn't that, I usually fed them to the dog, but if those were true, then the conclusion would necessarily follow. We're using a valid rule of inference there, that modus ponens again. So that would be a valid argument, but it's not sound because, sorry Dad, P1's not true. You can't just get strong and big by eating green beans. So there again is another example of an argument that is valid but not sound. So hopefully that clarifies it. Hopefully I didn't over-explain it. If you have any questions still, just go ahead and leave them in the comments. I'll see if I can clear them up for you there. And if you like this video, we'll be doing more like it. Please like and subscribe to support the channel. Thanks again.